In the session today, we are talking international marketing campaigns. And for any organisation that is looking to go international, global, however you describe it, the concepts and ideas, theories and examples that we're going to share in this session will hopefully get you moving forward in the right direction. It's a complex and very much nuanced area, this particular topic of international marketing campaigns. We're going to focus really in a number of areas that will hopefully start to give you a first few confidence steps on the journey if this is something that your organisation is interested in pursuing. And it will begin with market research, because we do need to understand at both a macro, sort of very broad level, as well as a very, very kind of regional level within certain countries that we might be looking to target. We need to understand their local preferences. We need to be thinking also about the economic conditions, as well as some of the differences in customer behaviour that we may well encounter if we're looking to break into these particular markets. Now, I've got a specific model or theory rather, that I want to share with you, because Hofstede's cultural dimensions theory is something that can work really nicely to get a little understanding, if you like, of how cultural influences can play out in customer behaviour. Because if you're used to a particular audience and a particular set of behaviours in your kind of existing models, these may well be very, very different when you approach a new marketplace. And very much, the marketing angle of one size does not fit all plays out in the global market to a much, much greater extent. And it is all about understanding local conditions, local dynamics, local preferences, local cultures, and the local behaviours, if you like, of these target customers who could be, as we say, very, very new to you as an organisation. So we're going to start to understand some of the cultural dimensions to analyse really the cultural traits within these new target markets, because this could be a showstopper for you right at the outset. It is far better to understand how things might play out at the beginning, rather than devote a lot of resources, a lot of time and energy into breaking into a new market and trying to do your marketing to a place and to a set of customer types or demographics that simply are not going to work for you. So this model is well worth looking at, because what you need to get a sense of as you start to analyse, particular markets, particular new countries that you might wish to explore, you need to be really understanding how they play out differently to your existing markets that you know very, very well. Now, what we might find is that there's a difference in power, for example, because some markets culturally will embrace a hierarchy, so they will be very much sort of used to sort of operating culturally in a certain way. Whereas they can be a lot more egalitarian in other markets. So the kind of the power distance, as we're talking about here in Hofstede's model, is a really interesting one to begin with, is kind of culturally, where is the power within this particular marketplace? You'll also see very, very significant differences, and I've got a few examples to share with you of what we might term individualism versus collectivism. In other words, is individualistic behaviours encouraged within the culture of the marketplace that you're looking to get into, or is it very much, it's about the collective, it's about working together as, culturally as a society or as a community, and the decision making and the behaviours are very influenced in that way. Again, could be very, very different to the marketplaces that you're used to. Also, uncertainty comes into play. The comfort or uncomfort or discomfort with uncertainty plays out really significantly in certain cultures. So be very, very aware that certain cultures will embrace uncertainty. They will be used to it, probably because of their history, the way that the politics, the way that the economics, the way that they're governed may well influence that. And in other countries, you might find that actually there's a real uncertainty uncertainty, or a real uncomfortable kind of feeling around uncertainty. So again, how would you then, with your products and services and your brand, how would you look to kind of integrate that within that sort of an environment? Also, the importance or not of femininity versus masculinity. Is there a gender balance here that culturally is something to take consideration for? And is nurturing important from a feminist nature, or is power important from a more masculine nature? And again, we're not saying that either is right or wrong, and we're not getting into the whole gender debate here. This is about sort of innate sort of cultural preferences, I guess you could call them. But knowing whether nurturing or power in terms of the way you position your services or the way you position your messages is really important. If it's more about feeling as a cultural, or it's more about thinking culturally within the target country you're going for, then reflecting back your style and tone of voice appropriately is going to be really, really key. And what are you going to be comfortable with also is another question, because this might require you to do a complete revamp of what you do already. And you may well want to do that, but you also may well not want to do that. The short-termism versus long-termism, this particular culture or this particular marketplace you're looking to break into, what is their orientation? Is it sort of traditionally short-term thinking, or is it more kind of futuristic, long-term view? Are they, culturally, are they kind of accepting of, getting into your organization and working with you as a brand, on a long-term basis? Is that acceptable culturally? Is that a kind of more attractive style? And we certainly see, some cultures being very, very about building the relationship for the long term, and others, it's much more transactional. It's much more about short-term gain. Typical example of building the longer term future could be the more sort of Mediterranean countries, those countries that border the Mediterranean, where long-term family relationships count for so much more than in a much more kind of transactional style, maybe more Northern European approach. So knowing these little nuances is really, really important. And so the kind of debate goes on. You can see here, even just purely from considering culture, there's a lot that goes into this. So we're going to kind of, if you like, jump and sort of, dance across each of these various criteria to just really get a sense of what is going to be appropriate. What are some of the factors that you need to think of to take your international marketing forward within sort of campaigns and communication? So we've looked a little bit there at some kind of sort of cultural preferences, but what are the sensitivities that come along with that? And how do you then focus on those sensitivities in your messaging and the way you present your products? Now, we've got a word here that comes in, and I always kind of smile at this word because it's actually quite an interesting one, which is localization. In other words, being global, but also acting locally. So thinking globally, but acting locally, localization. So, you might be a global organization, but actually the way that that manifests at a local level means that you're identifying elements in the campaigns that just need to be more local because you're being sensitive to cultural differences, or you're being sensitive to how your products and services, irrespective of your sector, how they would be perceived in those markets. And of course, global branding itself doesn't mean the same thing in every market. So even the name that you go to market with could be fundamentally differently perceived in a different market. So you've got to check all these things out very, very carefully. And also how, and we'll talk about this in a minute, how things translate into other languages. Because again, some words are very acceptable. Some words are kind of internationally renowned and accepted, whereas other words can have a completely different meaning. So actually having a local speaker and a local kind of citizen to give you that kind of feedback is obviously really important. And we've seen loads and loads of examples of this over the years. I mean, a really nice one is the one that's been, sort of quoted a lot in recent times, which just grabbed an image here from the Daily Mail, who did a big article on McDonald's and how their sort of chicken sandwiches around the world are kind of reiterated for different markets. And certainly certainly if you do any kind of traveling and you go into places like McDonald's around the world, Starbucks, very, very similar, where these are big global chains, but they will make things slightly sort of tuned, if you like. So the fundamental offering is the same, but there is a real cultural sensitivity. So within Japan, you will get a different kind of flavor, literally, of the brand. So it's the same product, but the way that it's packaged and offered and the way that the proposition is presented to you as a customer in that country is much more aligned with what you do. And particularly the Arabic version there in the bottom left-hand corner of the Macarabia chicken sandwich here is just really interesting, because rather than being in what we might just find in a sort of Western world would be the bun, the typical sort of McDonald's bun, here we see it in a flatbread. So again, reflecting back something that is much more easy, and I will use this phrase, easier to consume by that local culture. So again, we're talking here about food products, but it applies in every single sector. So just think a little bit about, what would the level of, let's call it customization or localization that I'd need to do if I wanted to break into a particular, new culture, because we're not really talking specific countries here necessarily, we're talking about much more cultural sensitivity. And if you take that down to the next level of detail, it's really important to remember that we are still going to be practicing in this international marketing, where it's a campaign or it's a product launch or whatever it happens to be, we're still going to be practicing good marketing planning. So the next level down would be to focus on segmentation. So we'll be focusing here at an international level slightly differently. So rather than necessarily just demographics, we're going to look at psychographics. So this will give us a real kind of sense of the more kind of preference-driven sort of framework of what we're offering here. So we're looking at, rather than just purely sort of data-driven, we're going to have data-driven there, and a lot of sort of successful sort of analysis of overseas markets will be data driven. You'll be able to do a lot of desk research. You'll be able to grab, reports from local markets. There are a lot of government reports if you're in the UK or the US. A lot of government sort of activities and agencies work on helping you to export. So you can tap into the government's export departments to help you get this and gather this data. But a lot of it is freely available through infographics, and you can even use AI. We'll talk a little bit specifically about how you can use AI in profiling international audiences in a moment. But what we're looking at here is to do a deeper dive into segmentation, and also then how we would use that in the STP model, which is segmentation, targeting, and positioning, to kind of align what you currently do with some new segments that are driven by preferences and behaviors and cultures as much as they are by the definitional, the normal demographic definition of how we break that segment down. So it is more detailed, it is more complex, but the data and the information is out there. So here's a little visual here for the STP marketing model, thanks from presentationgo.com, which is beautifully sort of defined here. You do this in order. So again, this is great for doing it in your kind of local market, but when it comes to the international market, it becomes ever more important. So you're going to do your segmentation. So you're going to divide the market that you're looking to target, or at least understand and audit, into smaller groups of customers with similar needs and characteristics. So the kind of stuff that you would have done, but in the international sense, add in preferences, add in culture, add in little nuances of the local market as far as you can as you build that segmentation profile. Then you can go into the looking at how you're going to select one or more of these segments to focus on and communicate with. So there's the first thing in terms of a top tip for international marketing campaigns is priorities. You do not have to hit the whole market. You can select a sub-segment of that market, that international audience, and do some testing. Run some draft campaigns, do it at a small focused level to prove the process, to make sure it works, to make sure you're comfortable with the activities and the systems and processes you're doing. And then you can then start to position things really successfully. So you can work on your propositions, you can start to create a really distinct and favourable image in the minds of these new markets, and take it slowly and take it steadily. What we're not looking to do here is a revolution. A lot of people are often tasked with, we want to break into this particular international market, go and do some country research, and we want to launch next month. I would always say, from experience, play the long game. Take your time over the planning and the auditing, evaluate, profile, and then prioritize. Doing that steadily and carefully will save a lot of time and a lot of energy in the long run. There is a temptation that you see these, golden opportunities, emerging from these overseas markets, but they are complicated. And we'll talk a little bit about how you can maybe tap into people on the ground in a little while. Now you'll find, and this is just a little example, simple little example from quantummarketer.com, which analyzes some of the music streaming audience in terms of some of the kinds of infographics that you can find on the web. And I thought this was just quite a nice one, because it gives you as well, and this would be something else you'd want to factor in to this early audit of these new countries that you're going to target. It gives you really a view, if you like, of what is the market currently served by. So who are the key players? What are the demographics age-wise that are picking up the kind of products and services that I'd be interested in offering? What are the gender demographics? What kind of balance do these players, what kind of market share already exists? And you'll find, and this was from a very, very quick little example that I did a quick little search on, you'll find there's a lot of data out there. A lot of people have already done this kind of research for you, because there will be other people, other marketers have gone before you, curious in terms of the market you're looking to review. And the reason for choosing this one, which is music streaming services, is because I thought it would be quite interesting to get a sense of the dynamics and the preferences, excuse me, the dynamics and the preferences within that particular country, but actually based on different sectors. Because, of course, if you think about your target audience, it isn't just about the products and services you offer. They have a broader lifestyle going on. So think, when you're profiling them and segmenting them, think about creating some real personas, and think about the other products, the other services that you could then also research to get a sense of, well, what is their lifestyle like? What do they actually do that is different to the current demographic that I normally target? So looking at other sectors that could also be influencing them in their day-to-day living can also give you a really interesting insight into the world that you're tapping into, because it isn't just a direct relationship, you and them. They're already living in this kind of dynamic environment. And so then what we need to do is, having identified who we're going to be thinking of targeting with our little test campaign, it is about kind of setting up some targets and some expectations. It's very likely that if you're working in an organization where you've been tasked with putting together a plan or a campaign to test out a new market, that the expectations will be very, very high. So what you need to do is kind of rein things back in a little bit, to do something at a very test or pilot level before you begin the big full-on scalable launch. So using things like Google Analytics, SEMrush, get a view of AI, get some social media insights for setting and tracking your campaign performance. This is all about focusing on very much KPIs, key performance indicators, to set your international market kind of expectations, if you like, at a certain level. So, this will be very exciting for your organization, probably. So people can very easily and very quickly get carried away by the scale of the opportunity. And particularly if, having done the research, you think, wow, that's a huge market. But of course, it's a huge market that doesn't include you. So for you to have the audacity as an organization to think you can just step in and clean the market up when it's already existing in a very, very likely way, then that is actually more than audacious. It's actually a little bit arrogant. So what we've got to do is prevent our organization from falling into that kind of arrogant sense of mind. So the way to do that is to focus on getting some really sensible KPIs, some key performance indicators that are going to give you some feedback on your campaign, on your approach into that market, and then report it back using something like the balanced scorecard, because that will give you a sense then of the reality of the situation that you're facing. So it's great having a positive attitude. It's great setting some maybe stretch targets, but look at this as something that you're trying to break into somebody else's party here. You know, why should the world suddenly face in your direction when it already exists and is already being served elsewhere, and very likely being served by a locally based offering? So you may well be looking to break into something where there's already an established heritage of local organizations who actually deliver pretty good value already. So your trick here is to kind of rein everyone and everything back in and say, look, this is an exploratory investigation into the opportunity. Let's not expect too much too soon. But the trick, of course, by using balanced scorecard, if you haven't used this before, it's really important to kind of, sense how well this can work for you, is that if you can use your KPIs, align those with the strategic targets that your organization has. So your indicators are kind of pointing to how well you're progressing towards hitting your targets, then you, because you're using balanced scorecard, can balance this really sensibly. So rather than just thinking, hey, it's all about marketing performance, or the amount of reach in my socials and all those kind of very mark-ons kinds of things, you can balance these reports and these KPIs in a financial sense, in a customer-focused sense, in a building a process for an international marketing campaign sense. And then also the kinds of gaps that you identify that you can then plug with learning and growth. And that's probably your personal learning and growth. So training or gaps, or maybe further audits, or maybe further resources that you need to tap into to be able to do this big time. So by using balanced scorecard, you're not just reporting on campaign results, you're creating a process. And again, for a lot of us, breaking into a new market, particularly one that is over the horizon in some international kind of sense, then actually doing it this way is really good, because we're building a robust process and system as we go about actually creating our pilot campaign. So there must have been people who've done this before, and I can tell you, having done this before myself on a number of occasions, yes, there are. There are successes and there are failures. I'm going to share a couple with you in just a second. One is, Starbucks expansion into China, focusing on local preferences, which has worked so well, and the growth that they've seen and experienced in China by being very, very sensitive to the local customs and culture and preferences and styles and behavioral patterns and purchase preferences, all of those things, they've got it absolutely right. So that's a well-documented case study. And at the other end of the spectrum, Walmart's exit from Germany, which, because of cultural misalignment, assuming that the German market will be just like our market at home, it was a catastrophic failure, and actually had to kind of pull out of that market. Now you can go to the Harvard Business Review and just do a search on these two examples, because what these will do is allow you to kind of really understand and explore from researching more international case studies like this. So the visual I'm going to share with you is kind of the growth and the number of Starbucks stores in China over the last sort of 15 or 16 years or so. So they've been doing this for some time. So hence, it is the long game. Remember I said about you're not going to be able to crack or break a market overnight. Look how long this has taken, but look where they are. They've moved from pretty much no profile back in 2015 to 2017, nearly 3,000 stores across China, both on a company-operated basis, so they've been able to grow from inside, as well as licensed stores using a kind of franchise-style model. So, you can do this if you're willing to commit to the long term. So that's a really, really interesting one. And I grabbed this little review, as I say, with the Walmart example and its failure in Germany. There's a lot of research on this one and a lot of reporting on this one. But I liked this one as a particular style of reporting back this particular case study, because this is a particular one that's used the PEST process. So a big kind of macro analysis to break down, well, why was it unsuccessful? And of course, as part of your evaluation of the marketplaces and your balanced scorecard, it's not just about reporting back the balanced scorecard. What you're going to need to do if you're running this international campaign is to think, okay, those are the numbers, that's the report, there's my analysis, that's what I see. What does this mean? And actually go deep into why, the reasons why the outcome is the outcome, or why those KPIs are amber, not green, or red, not amber, so that you get a real sense of actually what's going on. And this guy's actually highlighted 4 specific areas using macro analysis of why Walmart failed in Germany. Economically, Germany's a very, very competitive, low margin industry in this particular sector. And so that wasn't necessarily, trying to break into an already saturated country was not a good move. From a political perspective, the policies in Germany were not conducive to the entrance of big retailers into the country. A load of other kind of things as well that were going on there politically at the time, which again were not conducive. Socially, people in Germany were very price conscious, and overall the culture in Germany was very different to that in the US at the time. And a big one as well, technologically, German technology and German retail is amongst the best in the world. It really is world class. So breaking in with maybe a slightly substandard series of supply chain technologies was not a smart move. So you combine these they're big pieces, obviously at the scale of Walmart, but you combine these smaller elements together and you can see there's a big fundamental failing in a number of different areas. So what you could do is learn from this and actually think, okay, if I do a pest analysis in this target market that I'm looking to break into, alongside a pilot study, a pilot campaign to just see how we're perceived, if I pull together macro, bit of micro, pilot campaign, set some solid little KPIs here to report back how we're doing against these lovely, stretch targets that the business is setting me, I can then evaluate in a more holistic sense. And that will give you the kind of control that you're going to need. So when you come to kind of roll this out, one of the first things that you'll think about will be, okay, can I actually do this myself? Or do I need to be kind of bringing, multidisciplinary teams together to actually make this happen? Now, the chances are, the answer very quickly you're going to find is going to be yes. I'm going to talk to you in a minute about Tuckman's group development stages. Tuckman is a sort of psychologist who has created these forming, storming, norming, and performing kind of group development stages of how to put a team together. It's a particularly useful and particularly well-used method of actually developing an international team around you, because there will be a lot of challenges that will be very different to managing a team who literally sit next to you, around you in the office. Because as soon as you go to an international level, you will undoubtedly want people on the ground. Okay, so this is a fundamental step change. Even if you think, well, it's all very well you say that, Neil, but actually, it is all about us and kind of pushing this forward. And, I think we could probably manage some of the early stages of the planning, just from desk research or doing it remotely. But I will tell you that very, very quickly, you will get far better gains if you've got people on the ground, people in country. Now, how you decide to do that is very much down to you, and how you decide to communicate and coordinate them, particularly if these are across very, very different time zones. So you could be looking, if you're based in the UK, you could be looking to be doing this in the Far East, for example, where by the time you're waking up, they're going to sleep. So it's complicated. You've got to really plan this out really well. And I found this really interesting one from accountablenow.org for kind of just getting you to start thinking about, how am I going to position people around me? And this could be people who aren't necessarily direct reports, but they could be people who you or somebody in your organization knows, or maybe somebody in your supply chain can give you an introduction to somebody in this new market. It could be that as a result of making connection with an export agency from your government, you could decide, well, actually, that's quite interesting because they're giving me some connections on the ground. And there are, of course, introducers. There will be brokers. There will be people who will set up for you an infrastructure in that local marketplace. Now, it could be at this stage, it's too early in the game to do that, but just know that's possible. So what you need to do, and this is where I would always get a flip chart and some post-it notes out and start to plot out, who do I need as resources around me? Who do I already know? Where are the gaps? What kind of role would they be performing? How would I link to them? How would I communicate to them? How are we going to kind of come together as a team? What am I going to kind of be asking of them? Do I need to remunerate them? Do they need to be paid at this stage? Or could they, again, if they're looking to become maybe a partner in that local territory and you're going to use them as your representative locally? And I've seen this work really well because, of course, they've got the local knowledge. So you can both pick their brains as well as use them tactically on the ground to roll out the particular campaign or initiative that you have. So by plotting it out, and yours won't look anything like this, yours, when you're actually doing yours, will look different, but who and how many and what kind of scale are you working to? Who do you need? I'd start there. Who do I actually need to get this thing off the ground? And then who do I know to fill these roles? And push the boat out when you're starting to, kind of really do this, because you've got an opportunity here to do a what if exercise. What if I could have all the resources I want? Now, the chances are you're not going to actually get that. But why not at this stage? Because you're planning. If you go for the what if scenario, and if by adding up all these resources, it's a little bit more expensive than the budget you've got to spend, but actually it creates an ROI here because you can see with your key performance indicators that you're going to be able to achieve a lot more, maybe in a shorter time because of that local representation and knowledge. Then maybe it is worth investing a little bit more. So it's going to be part of your kind of, if you like, portfolio or armory of this kind of decision making and helping others in the organization to understand the scale and agree with you, the scale or not, that you're going to be rolling this out for. And then when you get, this was the Tuckman stages of group development thing I told you about. Once you've got the team together, you need to understand that things are not necessarily going to always follow completely the plan that you set at the outset. And this is often because of a number of things that have an international perspective. In other words, language. If you're dealing with people whose first language is not the same as yours, you then have to make sure your communication, the style and tone of voice that you're using is very, very clear. It could be that you're working in an environment where you have multiple different cultures and multiple different nationalities within your team. So just thinking that everybody's going to be like you and perform just like you is simply not going to be the case. I was very fortunate back earlier in my career working in a marketing management role where I was one of a number of representatives from different European countries, and we would meet once a month in a different country. We'd all kind of take it in turns to rotate it to talk about the European campaigns, and then we'd all go back and do our local versions of them. But for me, it was just so clear that so many different countries have very different styles of meeting in that sense. And we would all come to the meeting with our kind of cultural almost stereotype, if you like. So I would be there in a very British way, wanting to kind of get the plan there and do this and do that, and wouldn't want to take a long lingering lunch because I wanted to get the job done. Whereas other nationalities, wanted to have a much more kind of relationship building kind of meeting. So it's a very, very different thing when you enter into an international market. So embracing those differences, of course, because you're going to get different perspectives, and it's fascinating seeing those different perspectives emerge, but knowing that it isn't always easy. So by really listening and using a model like this, it's just a lovely little reminder of those differences, but how to then start to think about managing, communicating, collaborating, and then just constantly feeding back progress so that everybody knows at every point in this journey where you actually are. And again, that's where your balanced scorecard can obviously come into play. And then when you get into market, you're starting then to build the campaign. So you've got the targets, you've got your focus, you've prioritized, you know who you're going to be focusing on, you've got your representation both locally and here. So you're ready to go. So you've got your big plan together, you're good to go. Then comes the real kind of diligence, if you like, of your campaign. Because at this point, even with a pilot campaign, you have to be navigating regulatory and legislation challenges. And I'm going to call them challenges, not problems, because they're not. They are there to protect both you and that locality. And the regulations are different in different parts of the world. So here on the European continent, we are very, very familiar with GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. But elsewhere in the world, and I'm going to just show you a little checklist of some of the different little things that are going on in international markets. You need to do your pestle analysis. We know that for understanding the political and legal environments, particularly when it comes to understanding the local regulations, but then actually create a checklist for the countries that you want to target and know that they are going to be fundamentally different. I mean, just look at this list of the different things that you can encounter if you're trying to enter, a range of countries. I've just taken this list, from across the world, but, some are similar to GDPR. So some are going to feel quite sort of similar, and probably best practice is going to apply. But then there are some very, very, very country specific ones. And again, if you get into some of the countries where potentially some of the audiences are very, very high wealth, and we're looking sort of particularly at Russia or China, any of these countries, if you're permitted in your sector to be operating, or if it's appropriate to be operating in these countries, then there are very, very specific laws. And it's not just regulation, it's legislation. So this is law. And that for me is the difference. Regulatory is about kind of principles and policies. Sometimes it's self-policing, whereas legislation is law. And again, in an international market, you need to understand that difference, because you do not want to be infringing legislation if you're trying to break into an international marketplace, because then your legal team is going to be very, very busy. So doing your due diligence, doing the research, getting that search done, but again, tapping into the knowledge and the understanding of your local representative. That can be a very, very good way of doing it. And then deciding actually how you're then going to position your product or your service or your brand, deciding whether or not you are going to look at product adaptation or you're going to look at product standardization. Okay, I'm going to share with you in a minute KFC's menu adaptation in China, which is a really interesting little example here, which will kind of hopefully bring this to light. And there is a matrix, as with all these things. There's a little bit of theory that has gone before you, so you can kind of be drawing on best practice. And it's the PCA matrix. But the whole idea here is really what you're trying to do is to set some guidelines for yourself to decide, because hopefully this isn't going to be a one-time activity. But if you set some guidelines for deciding between whether you're going to do standardization of products or you're going to do some adaptation of your products, will help you then as you come to roll these particular initiatives or campaigns out across different target markets. But first of all, let's just have a little look at this first one. Now, this one is really interesting. And the reason that for me this one's really interesting is because it is so different to the international offer that KFC would put out for some of their products. This is rice bowls, which is very, very specific to some countries here. So we are looking at these rice bowls, the two actually in the image here. One is a flavored rice bowl that is very specific to the Japanese market. And then you have a similar kind of product, but it's actually sort of differently flavored for the Spanish market. but these are rice bowls. How many rice bowls did you see if you're in New York, for example, in KFC, or in the UK, in London? You just wouldn't physically see these products. So this is the interesting thing about this, is you can have the fundamental core product, but you're either going to start to adapt it for that local area, or you're going to standardize it across a number of different territories, but with a local spin to it. So again, this is all about the decision making. And of course, as you adapt your products, you need to be doing the ROI calculation for the return that you are potentially going to get, so that you can monitor it. Because of course, to adapt, to create these differentials of your products and services will cost you. So it's important to understand that that is, a key strategic decision that has to be backed up behind the overall decision making that your business, not just you in marketing, but that your business is actually going to be taking. So it gets complicated. You've got to get this stuff right, because you can waste a lot of money and attention, a lot of resources and budget by kind of like almost just paying lip service to it. It's like, oh, we'll just try, or we'll just do this. If you find yourself using the word just, then there's more planning to do. So here's the model. There's a nice little matrix here for you to decide just how much change you would like. It could be that this is an opportunity, when you start to look at it, that this is an opportunity for new product development. Now, I'm not condoning that necessarily if you're doing a pilot campaign, but if, having rolled out a pilot campaign or two, you decide that actually the opportunity is big enough, we've now got enough evidence to know the market wants it, this particular country is aligned with our brand. Culturally, we've kind of hit the mark. Right, we now know this is the product they want. So you've kind of almost bought your right to add more value. So you're starting to then increase your product portfolio by developing very country-specific products. Well, the question is, no, you're not. So at the other end of the spectrum is, no, we're going to put into the marketplace just a translation, literally, of what we currently do in our local market. And if you do that, and that's appropriate, then that is the right answer. So I'm not saying you have to do fundamental changes. I'm just saying you've got to think this through, and you've got to be careful about how that works out. And of course, all the things that we're looking at here is very much looking to kind of leverage opportunity, leveraging the activities that are happening, and also global trends. So keeping your eye as you go through your international marketing campaign or broader research project, identify and utilize global consumer and technology trends. Be looking at the bigger picture. Always, as a marketer or as a digital practitioner, have one eye on the macro. Constantly be just looking on the kind of the marketing media pages. Have some good sources. Be using X, formerly Twitter, for example, to create some lists so you can kind of track how certain markets are going. Look at all the big players, people like Forrester, for example. What kind of things are they reporting on? A lot of those white papers have excerpts, and those excerpts can often give you a flavor of where the opportunities are. So watch those trends. Nike, great example of an organization who devotes a lot of resources, literally millions, to embrace global fitness trends, and they adapt their strategies accordingly. So it is about kind of keeping one eye and one ear open at all times. So one eye and one ear is actually on your campaign, but another eye or ear is on looking at the broader picture that can influence. And of course here, here's a nice example that Nike will have drawn upon the global sportswear market, is you can be looking, as I said earlier, outside of your industry to get a sense of actually what is going on in particular marketplaces, because this will give you, as a marketer, a sense of, well, what is the bigger picture? Can I spot from maybe even this infographic, which is completely unrelated to what I do? I don't use, I use, but I don't do in my professional sense. I don't do global sportswear. I don't do clothing. I don't do sports shoes. But if I see this as a trend, and there's a significant trend, particularly here in the shoes within sportswear, is there anything in that piece of knowledge, that piece of information that I could translate and evaluate that me in my sector could actually learn from? So this is being a really all-round marketer. The beauty of international marketing is once you open this up, you cannot refuse to see opportunities coming at you from every direction with different cultures, different countries, different products, different kind of industries that you would normally not be looking at on a day-to-day basis. And then it gives you an opportunity. Where do you want to play? Because this is an opportunity that will open up as you start to then evaluate the success of this first few steps you're putting in. Do you want to be, as part of your brand, going into these new markets? Do you want to be, talking to the innovators, the early adopters, or do you want to be playing in a marketplace that, is all about focused on, the late majority, people who, are in a very kind of well-established, you could call it a mature marketplace? Where do you want to be? Because aligning your brand in a marketplace, once you look at those trends, a marketplace that is moving, because even the slowest moving markets are moving, then it gives you an opportunity to make decisions based on the markets you're targeting. So it's all super, super aligned with the brand proposition that you have. So what kind of tools are going to help you to do all of this? Well, if you want to do some market research and get some insights, there are tools. You've got tools for cross-cultural communications platforms. There are some that are going to give you, good sort of translation apps, etc. You can do international SEO and content management. That's a really, really useful thing once you start to roll this out. Localized advertising and social media management. Hootsuite, for example, has geo-targeting. Google Ads have Market Finder, things that you wouldn't normally associate with just serving an existing market. If you want data analytics and customer insights, Tableau or Hotjar are going to show you what different landing pages for these different target audiences, how they're performing, and how do people in that country respond to this landing page differently to what you'd normally expect. And that's what you're looking for here. You're looking for the difference, you're looking for trends, you're looking for things that will make your products and services stand out and sizzle in this new marketplace on your understanding of the difference between that market and your existing market. That's kind of the fundamental role here within international marketing campaigns. And the lovely thing to know is, even if you're listening to this and thinking, okay, Neil, but I don't have a big team, I don't have all these resources. In fact, I have no connections overseas, but I just get a sense from the things I'm seeing that there could be an opportunity for me over there somewhere, but I'm not really quite sure. Then leverage AI. Okay, AI is going to give you a lot of insights. So the likes of ChatGPT, others are available, are going to be there in this conversation. So even if you have nobody working for you, so you are a team of one, you now are a team of two, because you can get into chat with somebody or something, let's call it something, i.e. ChatGPT, who actually does have the data. They've got access to the data. So you've now got a team member, and you can leverage AI in your campaigns and in your plan. You can do it for the research to get customer insights. You can use it to help you plan the campaign and personalize. Use it to target and do your customer segmentation. The content creation and localization, that's an absolute no-brainer. We know it can do that. But if you want to do programmatic advertising on a geographically targeted basis, it can help you do that too. And of course, now with the new kind of data analytics feature in ChatGPT, it will help you with your performance analysis and optimization. So my big recommendation here is, if you're curious, if you want to take those first few steps, yes, it is about learning some of the theories and the best practice, which hopefully I've shared with you here, and it's been interesting, but it's about chatting with AI, because the answer is out there. The opportunity is out there, and that's really what you need to be plugging into. So understand the local regulations. That's going to be key. Make sure you use ChatGPT to help you with that. Think about cultural sensitivities and this idea of localization. Just imagine yourself on the ground in that country or on that territory. How is it different? How does it look different? I mean, obviously, if you can get to visit it, that's so much the better. But a lot of us are doing, digital marketing remotely now in this sense. So, getting as much local data and information that you can turn into really powerful intelligence is key. And for that, you can leverage your AI and do your data analytics with AI. So learn how to do that, because on an international basis, that really is your friend. In fact, that's possibly the most valuable resource that you've got at your disposal right now. Make sure that you are effective in your cross-cultural communication. You can't lose sight of your core market. One of the things that I've seen businesses do over the years is, they get very carried away with the international marketing and they forget they've got a core market at home to serve. So this is really, really key to make sure that you do not cannibalize your own existing business. Maybe here the 80-20 rule. 80% is focused on existing business and maybe 20% is this exploration into this new international market. Because of course, what you're doing with that 20% is continuously learning and adapting as you go. So if there are two things I can really share with you is get GPT on your side, get it to help you do all of these things. So begin the conversation with it and really brief it well and listen to what it feeds back to you. Take on board the challenges that it comes back with, because that will be very, very valuable. And the second piece of guidance and advice that I've learned from very harsh experience over the years is to document everything. One, because you might need it in the future, but two, is so that you feel like as you go into this, it is more than just marketing campaign. What you're doing is you're actually building a robust, diligent, solid process. So there's a process that will use all of the kind of assets and the systems and the technologies that we've talked about, as well as human beings, of course, but actually it's a process that you're building. So the most successful international marketers obsess about process because it's complicated, it's very detailed, and if you do not build it as a process, you can get very swamped very, very quickly. So it's a great opportunity. I wish you all the best of luck with it. And if you want to connect with me and share your success stories, it would be great to hear. So connect with me on socials at Neil Wilkins X if we aren't already connected. And of course, keep in touch with all the rolling program of college webinars that we have, marketingcollege.com/events for the upcoming program that we have. And we're going well into next year now. So, there's a lot of topics that are coming on stream and they will build on this kind of topic and others. So I wish you every success with your dabbling and your exploration into international marketing. And I hope you have a really great campaign and a lot of great learning en route.